This is continuation of the lecture about household income and production. Sorry I had to stop it, but now we're gonna finish it. So we were talking about those feeding industries like coal mining that are not profitable. They're actually, if you just shut down all the coal mines, it will be better for the economy if they will work. Seriously, in Ukraine, in many countries. But country or government cannot allow that, because what we're going to do with those people? They need jobs, and they don't have skills to become engineers, and that's a challenge. And that challenge is addressed differently. And I really prefer here an approach in European, particularly in Japan. It's also quite popular, where companies are responsible for their staff. Like there was a recent case, a nice article about Mercedes-Benz, because there was a research. They compared the United States, and there are all these car manufacturers. They complain, people who work there, that it's all technological progress, so we hate to lay over tons of people, and they don't have jobs, so that's a problem. And they compared Germany, where actually the car manufacturers in Germany are, I believe, 3 times, or in Germany actually, German economy is 3 times more industrialized compared to United States. So they have more robots, they have more technology in the sector, but they do not lay over people. That's kind of a paradox. And what happened? So the researchers went in, and it turned out that in Germany, it's very hard to lay over people for companies. So if Mercedes decided to lay over 10,000 people, they have to pay them like tons of money, more than like annual wage and all the social benefits. It's just so expensive that companies retrain people. So it's not even an obligation of the government to retrain people. It's Mercedes itself. It say, well, I want to replace this production line with, let's say, 1,000 people with the robots, because it will be cheaper and more efficient. What I'm going to do with 1,000 people? They don't lay over them. They don't fire them. They say, okay, we have some job opportunities in sales or service, other stuff, dealership, and we will retrain them for other jobs. And they keep people, same in Japan, the companies keep people for the entire career, as long as a person wants to proceed different opportunities, but they never lay over people. And what happens, it's just younger generation they don't hire new people for those jobs. So like there are no young coal miners, because the coal miner owner knows that if he hires a young person, then you need to keep for the entire life. So they don't hire new people, but they just reallocate people to different jobs time by time. So that's logic behind it. It's not perfect, it's not ideal, there are always issues in any place, but I feel like that strategy overall is much better than the idea of either keeping industries running, that is done in Ukraine a lot, and that is in US now it's done on the cost of environment, which is not a good idea too. Those regulations were at place for a reason, to protect our rivers and air, to protect people from diseases. And there are a lot of problems in the coal mining industry related to that. And still, it's not a really profitable thing to do so for overall economic purposes. So for some people, of course, it's profitable, but not for workers who work there. It would be much better for them if they would be reallocated to industries or part of the same energy industry where new opportunities appear. We have rising renewable industry, and I bet coal miners would prefer to be, installing solar panel or creating solar panels. It's first way better for the health, and it's, I would say, more maybe creative job, because you work with some new technology, you learn something, and that would be possible if companies were responsible for that, or a government was responsible for that. At least someone in the economy was responsible for that. And the last one here in the realistic view is that most industries, especially developed industries of developed countries, they have international markets. So a lot of problems come from the international market, and there is high speed of development, high risk, because you don't just produce locally and sell locally. That government can oversee the entire process. Oh, this is produced locally, this is consumed locally. If there is some problems with production or consumption, the government can manipulate, step in, spend some money, help out. But we live in a world that is so interconnected. We have a BMW factory here in the United States, and we export BMWs from United States to China. And we have a General Motors factory in China that at least announced that they will export from China to United States American cars, American brand Buicks. So if you're about to buy a Buick, check. There is a high probability that it was made in China, actually. And so this idea of this local business, support local business, the same with employment, it requires a lot of knowledge nowadays for the government to figure out the right policy. Because, we'll support American companies, but you see, GM is exporting from China, actually, making cars in China, while a foreign company is making cars in United States. So policies became more complicated, and economy we have now is way more complicated. So it's not that straightforward anymore. And last one, I'd like you to have a look on how we measure industrial production. So we have industrial production index. That is very simple. It just shows us how industrial production is growing. It is a very unique indicator in terms of the way it's developed, because it's the only existing originally real indicator. So it has nothing to do with money. It's the only indicator that actually has nothing to do with money. Well, unemployment rate also has nothing to do with money, but in terms of production, because GDP is calculated in money, income is calculated in money. And what's wrong with money? Money are devaluating. US dollar right now is not the United States dollar 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And it's very, even though I mentioned we adjust for inflation, but we have problems with inflation calculations as well. So all those money, when we bring money, it creates certain issues. And you never know, are we growing because we actually growing, or are we growing because just we print some money and now what used to cost $1 now costs $2? So are we growing this way, or are we actually getting rich? And in these terms, industrial production index, it's calculated based on a physical amount of things produced. It has its flaws because, for example, cars. It just calculates the amount of cars, of units that are produced. Now, if you take I don't know, Ford Focus 2018 and Ford Focus 1990, those are very different cars, and this indicator counts them as the same car. It's just a car. It actually counts any car as just a car. There is no division. So it just summarizes how many cars produced this year compared to last year. And now we make, let's say, Tesla compared to some old car type, and they all sum the same, which, as you may guess, a lot of quite a disadvantage. But what it brings us, if you look from another perspective on advantage, it just gives us, without money, just how many people have cars, how many cars we actually produce. Without all those fancy and complicated money issues, just the physical amount of cars, steel, clothes, food, all the production, physical amount, physical growth rate. And it is very important because, as I mentioned, money brings a lot of distraction. And you can follow the link and see the dynamics for United States. It's quite interesting. Not that positive as GDP. We see a lot of problems in industrial production. We had a huge crisis after 2008 and then a little bit of recovery, but not that strong as indicators with money. That's what it brings. Because we pumped so much money after crisis of 2008 in the economy, it's not that, GDP, other stuff, a lot of that is actually fake. It's not real. It's just games with money. But that is real. Whatever produced, there's 500,000 cars produced. Now it's 400,000 cars produced. We have less cars produced, physical cars. Even in monetary terms, they might be worth more, but it depends how you look on benefits. If we want everyone to have a car, and a new car, for example, or a relatively new car, we want to see the quantity increase of real goods and services. And the second indicator is industry as a part of GDP. It also important to see how industrialized are the countries, and we can see that US compared to other countries is actually quite low. Okay, let's open the link and we can see that if you click on this, in this table, you see agriculture production, industrial production. So you can sort, if you click on this kind of double arrows looking up and down, and let's look on percentage. So we don't care about absolute amount in dollars, we look on percentage of industry. So that would be basically, for the world, it's 30.5%. So that's a third column of numbers. And if you click on that, let's go from the highest first. So we have Saudi Arabia, 66.9, Emirates, Indonesia. Usually it's developing countries. They are heavily industrialized now because of the investment. So everything comes eventually to place. Those FDI, foreign direct investments, came at some point of time to Saudi Arabia. Well, Saudi Arabia has a lot of oil, so that's a bit different. But Indonesia, China, South Korea, Colombia, those countries, foreign investors support this growth. So that's way over average. Now let's bring them back. So for descending order from lowest, we see Greece is just below 18%, France, and United States is third from the actually bottom. So if we see on the lowest percentage, United States goes after Greece and France, and that's a problematic indicator. As I mentioned, that's a starting point for our development, and we lost quite a lot here, and that is indicator of a problem. And for this would be all. So have a good day.